or a steal a few clicks away. InsaneRadioDeals.com.
We are VTRN Sports, 93.3 FM, W227BG Timberlake at 1320 AM.
I'm Andy Gresh for the Sports Minute, sponsored by AutoZone. Get in the zone, AutoZone. A lot of teams are complaining about the tush push in the NFL. Here's what I don't understand. Why aren't more teams trying to do this themselves? If you've got 5 bigs up front that are pretty good, you can run the tush push as well. Time for teams to stop wanting to get rid of the play and start embracing it and doing it themselves. I'm Andy Gresh.
Are you a parent of a 2 to 8-year-old? Listen closely for an exciting offer, then head to abcmouse.com/radio to learn more. By now, you've probably heard of ABC Mouse.
ABC Mouse is like a little one-on-one teacher. It has helped her so much.
We're offering a promo at abcmouse.com/radio to try it for free for a month, then $14.99 per month until canceled. Go to abcmouse.com/radio to see this offer. That's abcmouse.com/radio. Actual ABC Mouse users compensated for their testimonials, sponsored by Age of Learning.
I had the worst dream last night. You were in a car crash and the kids and I were on our own. We had to move out of the house because I couldn't afford it anymore.
That's awful, hon.
My brother got life insurance from Ethos and it only took 10 minutes. And he got $2 million in coverage for around $2 a day. It's all online. No medical exam. He just answered a few health questions right from his house.
Ethos, here we come.
Visit ethos.com/sports. Ethos.com/sports.
Sample rate is a 10-year term life policy for 30.
Selection, value, finance options, and exceptional service. Why start anywhere else? It's all in one location at the Used Car Superstore on the Sheeler Motor Mile. And with straightforward pricing and inventory arriving daily, there's no reason to start anywhere else than the Motor Mile. Volume selling means volume pricing, and we've got the volume. The Used Car Superstore is your one stop for most makes and models. Cars, trucks, vans, SUVs, many have miles in the teens, remaining factory warranties, and some are even local one-owner vehicles. Shop over 900 used vehicles in stock now, more than any other dealer in the area. Sheeler owns the finance company, so getting approved for credit is easy on the Motor Mile. With financing options for every budget, you're a valued customer and not just a number on the Motor Mile. The Used Car Superstore on the Sheeler Motor Mile, your premier family-owned car dealer serving Southwest Virginia and surrounding areas for 50 years. I-81 exit 118C in Christiansburg. Call 866-SHEELER1. Always open at Sheeler.com. And we're excited to welcome Honda and Hyundai to the Motor Mile family. Why start anywhere else?
Guests are great, except unwanted guests. At Specialty Exterminating, we know the difference. Hi, I'm Sabrina Kennan with Specialty Exterminating. We help you keep unwanted pests out of your home. Now we can keep those reptiles away. Our new reptile repellent is the perfect add-on for your pest prevention service. It's pet and people safe, so it's perfect for any homeowner, especially pool owners and homes in wooded and rural areas. Call us so we can repel the reptiles. Specialty Exterminating, your pest prevention partner since 1979.
You're stepping into the fast lane on the VTRN Sports app, 93.3 FM and 1320 AM Lynchburg, or by asking Alexa or Google Home, open VTRN Sports Lynchburg. Now, take the fast lane through the topics that matter across the Commonwealth. This is the fast lane with Ed Lane.
Easily one of our bigger weak points as we welcome you into the fast lane is, let's keep it real here. We've got an hour each day, and we love the guests that come on. They provide great insight. Whoever's with us. Today it's TJ, sometimes it's Trey, even Ty and Phillip are often here with us in the fast lane. They've got great insight. They're working hard, and yes, we bring them on because they do lots of things, and the insight is part of the value. Which means that we have to get all Usher here for a moment.
These are my confessions.
And we've had a lot of confessions if you've heard us the last couple days. Fast Lane, Ed Lane, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and wherever you listen to podcasts. But we often are struggling when it comes to taking time for feedback. Now, we're at the time of year, and I'm not going to just go into default sports talk mode. Back in the day, it was open up the phone lines because we're not creative enough to come up with something. Do you know what I'm talking about, TJ, by the way?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Like, please tell me you've been around some of these sports talk people where, they really don't plan.
No.
So all they do is just open phone. And look,
oh, yeah.
I am all for our great listeners chiming in. You can call us, 434-534-8500. We don't often give the number out because sometimes by the time people would call, we've got the guest on, and newsflash, we're not moving the guest out of the way just because someone has something to discuss. But there are times where it does make sense. So that's part of it. But look, the beauty of social media. TJ_Wilkerson 8, correct? Is that the right number?
Yes, sir. That's correct.
Yes,
yes
I remembered it. And Fastlane, Ed Lane, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I'll figure yours out. It'll get ingrained in this minor cranium of mine.
It's a great start.
But I don't often get to the feedback as often as I should in the Fastlane. And you, the listeners, provide a lot of good feedback. So we're doing it a little bit differently today, Wednesday. Yes, we will have the Fast Five at 5-ish momentarily and still opine because we just can't help ourselves. And yes, great insight coming up. Brett Friedlander, ACC reporter, SaturdayRoad.com, followed by Ben Cates on local sports. Today was the Lynchburg Hillcats Media Day. We're in the throes of spring sports across the area, and we've wrapped up winter sports not too long ago. So we'll get with him around 5:45 here in the Fast Lane. But it's overdue. It's time for some fan feedback.
Come join the chat or give us a piece of your mind. Trey Lyle VT and Fastlane Ed Lane on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Now, it's time for fan feedback in the Fastlane.
Yes, fam feedback, because you are our family. You're our listeners, and we consider you to be family. So, first of all, again, because I'm not above shameless plugs, Trey had a great segment at the beginning of the morning warm-up today on Buzz Williams from Texas A&M most recently, but before that, Virginia Tech and Marquette, now to Maryland. 4 of the 5 power conferences in which he's coached. And the pattern of behavior being 5 to 6 years at a spot, Buzz Williams wears his welcome out. Even the very diplomatic David Teal of dailypress.com had a great article in a softer way that, again, usher here in the Fast Lanes. I'm not very good at soft landings, the way, certainly not to the Hall of Fame caliber level of David Teal. Buzz Williams just is who he is. He burns people out. He's hard to deal with at times. It works in the short term, but over the long haul, he has a history of wearing his welcome out at certain places. And I do believe you've got to give credit where it's due. The guy does care about his players, by all accounts. He really does. If you hear what people have said about him, players at every single stop, they swear by him. And as a coach, that is an extremely important, and let's be real here, in this transactional nature of college sports, it's a lost art. So he does deserve credit for it. But multiple truths can exist. He's great with players, but staffers and those around him, sometimes it's a little bit much or a lot much. But Ben chimed in. If only Maryland was still in the ACC, imagine that, Ed. Then you and Trey could have one of your favorite coaches back as a topic on your show year-round. You know what, Ben? He's right. We easily could. Instead, he's at Maryland used to be in the ACC, which that opens up another can of worms of if you're a school like Maryland, and I'll put Rutgers into this category as well, recent additions to power conferences where clearly they're in a healthy enough spot financially.
Not to get all political, Morgan Wallen recently said on Sunday after Saturday Night Live, "Get me back to God's country. Get me back to God's ACC with the Maryland Terrapins, man."
I mean, look, and that's not political in my eyes. That's just sports related. Now, Morgan Wallen elicits political responses from people. We're not going down that road, but he had a sports comment, and I'm old school. I love the 9-team ACC. I'm still bitter that the ACC, we want the small, culturally relevant schools, because, when I think of Boston, I think Boston College. And when I think of New York City, I think upstate New York and Syracuse. They should have added Virginia Tech. They should have added Miami. And they should have added West Virginia, because those are the schools that had the big brands and, at least in Miami's case when they're winning, passionate fan bases that provide value. I don't think the ACC has ever been strengthened by Boston College, which is clearly a bottom feeder, as a small private school, and Syracuse. Maryland would be great. But it does beg that question about Maryland of, you got Buzz Williams, maybe you have a chance to do well at basketball, but they had an AD, at least in Damon Evans, who left for SMU, and that whole prickly situation with Kevin Willard. That, let's be real here, they've tried to be a football school, and you kind of wonder. On the one hand, I don't blame anybody for doing that. Virginia Tech, let's look better at our backyard if we're going to criticize Maryland and kind of look at that. There's a local relevant angle to the whole Maryland situation with Kevin Willard, where he, clearly was needling and demanding. Hey, it's kind of Buzz Williams-esque, ironically, in that it's a high-maintenance approach. And Maryland is known to have some of those boosters, notably Kevin Plank, the founder of one of the apparel companies whose name we're not going to mention because they're not a sponsor, but they're based out of Baltimore, and they like protecting this house. If you want to Google that, protect this house. So you can figure it out. So, that's what you get with these type of people, is when you bring in higher maintenance people, oftentimes they're not afraid to burn or even in some cases nuke the bridges with the athletic directors. And, it is a fine line. On the one hand, you want winning. On the other hand, you don't. But Maryland, I think, is in a spot similar to Virginia Tech in the sense that you can make a very compelling argument that they would have more success if they invested in basketball the way Kevin Willard wanted.
Yeah.
As far as having a sport to win a national title. Raise your hand. Don't worry. I'm not afraid that anybody's going to have to call Trost Law over this because nobody should when they're driving, and therefore there should be no auto accidents because of this. So no need to call 777-HURT. But raise your hand if you believe Maryland has a better chance of winning a football championship or a basketball championship. Same at Virginia Tech. Same at Virginia. Now, let's put this in context. Right now, until we get the next iteration of college football realignment, and let's not kid ourselves, there will be another round of realignment, and it may impact other sports, but it is going to be driven by college football.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to be in as best a desired spot as possible until some iteration happens. Truthfully, I don't think we're looking at a 48 or a 72 team conference in college football. They've already started annexing brands. They'll do it again. They're going to look for the biggest and most relevant ones. And that means they're going to cut some out of the Big Ten, and they'll cut some out of the SEC, and they'll cut some from the ACC and maybe the Big 12, and they'll just take what they think is the best, and that's who they're going to bring into the new Super League. That's my vision of it in 5 years when this thing transpires, and Notre Dame will certainly be a part of that. But this is where you are. So if you're Virginia Tech, the lesson with Maryland and the whole Kevin Willard airing the dirty laundry out, boxing the AD into committing to SMU. Hey, I think the AD's gone to SMU, so I don't know how we're going to be able to negotiate and handle this situation. Basically saying the AD was looking at the job and then making it difficult for him to backtrack. That's kind of a backstabbing move of Kevin Willard. You combine that with airing Maryland's dirty laundry of what they didn't have financially. Do you really want to be doing that in this day and age? I get it's a call to action, but I think there are better ways to go about it.
Yeah.
But I get the point behind it because the lesson is Maryland basically said, hey, we need to be as relevant as possible in football to have a chance. I think a lot of schools are going to be in that situation right now until we get to 5 years down the road. Virginia Tech's already there. The rubber already met the road with them. They will invest more for Mike Young in men's basketball. Chester Frazier, assistant coach, we've got that for Virginia Tech. And I think it's a great hire and retention. And they're spending more money to at least give themselves a chance to field a competitive team in college basketball.
Yeah.
Maybe not Final Four caliber, but competitive. But they already lost Kenny Brooks because, let's be real here, Virginia Tech, they don't have the resources of Kentucky and the SEC to devote to all the other sports. Kenny Brooks got that at Kentucky. And even though it was a down year relative to expectations, they still made the tournament and still are probably on more stable footing and can afford to invest more. So I get that. But there are bigger parts to this. And this is just the nature, TJ, of where we are in college sports, where kind of the point of Buzz Williams in the ACC. Does Maryland regret being in the Big Ten? From a win-loss standpoint, I think their fans honestly would say yes. I think it kind of stinks because there's not natural rivalries, and they really aren't relevant in basketball. There's not the same passion and fervor around the teams they play in the history like there was in the ACC. But they are in a more stable spot financially, and people forget, but that athletic department, they were leaking oil in a bad financial place, which is why they took that move to begin with. And that's why something like this transpired. So to listener Ben's point on Buzz Williams in the ACC, that it would be fun, it would have been. But I think Maryland, as much as their fans would love to be back in the ACC, and as much as fans lose in this, and it's not fun to think about, yes, we won the Balanced Budget Award. I mean, let's be real here. That's why these decisions are made. Meanwhile, the other part to this, and we touched on this quite a bit, and we'll have so many opportunities to revisit the Virginia Cavaliers, but they're hiring of Ryan Odom, and it's brought in a number of people with different thoughts when it comes to Virginia basketball and the outlook for them going forward. I've said it before. Tony Bennett is the greatest coach in Virginia men's basketball history. Sorry to the Terry Holland fans out there, but Tony Bennett won for a long period of time. He got them a national championship, and if you're giving me which direction is more indicative, it would be Tony Bennett. But you needed a guy in there that was going to understand where this team was right now and the reality of this day and age. And for Virginia, they brought in a guy in Ryan Odom that just seems to fit with where we are. One of these elements is the fact that the style for Virginia basketball makes more sense. One of them being this. I don't think this is a shock to anybody, but they're going to have to be more offensively focused.
It's been well documented. I love offense, right? I love offense.
That was Ryan Odom at his introductory press conference. And when asked to elaborate, appropriately enough, he actually looked back to his time at Hampton-Sydney.
We played fast. We played fast at Hampton-Sydney. And so that's where I learned the speed of the game. And we pressed, and we're up full court at all times. And it was hard to play more than 27 minutes.
And that's crazy to think about, because if it's hard to play more than 27 minutes, then you need stars, but you just need raw depth and athleticism to play in a system like what Ryan Odom has. And again, I've said this before, I'm bullish on the direction of Virginia, in part because, and look, Ryan Odom has had defensive-heavy teams like this past year at VCU. But he's had other years where they have had the more gelled pieces in place, and they will push the tempo even more than in prior years. He caters his team to what they do over a long period of time. And Shannon chimes in. I've got early observations on the Ryan Odom era at Virginia. 9 players have hit the portal. I love it. I think I might actually become a UVA admirer again. And if you haven't learned this about me yet, I'll emphasize it again. I love aggressive moves like Ryan Odom retooling the roster at Virginia, and they're going with him. Shannon adds, sounds like Ryan Odom did his version of a Coach Prime Louis speech when arriving at UVA. Now, I'll back off a little bit. I'm pretty sure Ryan Odom probably was not that blunt and in your face and allowing cameras to come in. But look at his actions. I mean, he's allowed 9 guys, everybody but Elijah Gertrude and Elijah Saunders, who want to be at Virginia, have entered the portal. And yeah, you probably want some guys to stick around from a prior era. Just, Colorado had 12 in Coach Prime's first year. So, that was a lot. But the theory behind it is you are retooling the roster. And this is going to be, I wouldn't say an annual deal at Virginia, but you've got to be willing to do that more often. And, my point to what Shannon has observed about the initial Ryan Odom era at Virginia, and Brett Friedlander of Saturday Road is going to join us around 5:25 today in the fast lane. And he might be able to correct me on this, but it's this theory, and that is Tony Bennett made lemonade out of lemons.
Yeah.
But they were lemon ingredients, and there was only so great that the drink was going to taste with the players that were there. And Tony Bennett every year did that. And that's why he's a Hall of Fame coach. That's why he's the best in Virginia history. But especially in the last 5 years where they did not win an NCAA tournament game. And they didn't have the talent that they had when they won it all. Everyone points to luck, but they've got 2 guys that are on the best team in the Eastern Conference regular season-wise. Not favorite to win it. They shouldn't be. Boston should be. But the Cleveland Cavaliers, Ty Jerome and DeAndre Hunter are both there. Both on that championship team. Mamadi Diakite has been in the NBA. Kyle Guy, I know he's back in Virginia now as an assistant, and maybe one of those pieces you keep around, even though a lot of the staff is already set. You find a way to keep a guy in an Isaiah Wilkins because you want a cultural piece that resonates with the fans and kind of understands the UVA way, and often former players fit that bill really well. But there was talent there. Tony Bennett made lemonade out of lemons. And when you removed the greatest coach of all time in Virginia basketball history, sorry to Terry Holland, RIP to him, you remove that ingredient. And then all of a sudden, they're just lemons. And most coaches don't want to be trying to make that type of lemonade, especially if they don't fit what you want. This is absolutely the right move to reset. And, and not the same reason for Shannon, because I think I respect Tony Bennett, not just the person, but the way he maximized his talent at Virginia more, and the fact that he still managed to win. But the timing had to change because it was growing stale product-wise. And Tony Bennett, in spite of that, the pieces don't fit what most coaches need. I mean, for crying out loud, they were trying to turn a wing player into a point guard, and Jalen Worley from Florida State. And, hey, again, I'll throw my hands up. I believe Tony Bennett could have pulled that off because there are 6'7" point guards in the NBA that run the ball. Duke has 6'5" point guards all the time, pretty much every year. So you can find them. And if a guy can create that skill set and develop it, it would have been Tony Bennett. But when he's gone, it made sense why, Jalen Worley's in the transfer portal. I don't blame him at all. I get why others. Christian Bliss had his own issues with sticking around. And maybe you keep some, maybe you don't. But this is the point now for Virginia. I am with Shannon that the roster had to be reset. And you've got a coach that he wants to play fast at times. They're going to have offense. I don't think this is going to be slacking off on defense. But when you talk about a coach's game plan is 25 minutes to 27 minutes a game with given players because they're so gassed, that means you're just going to need more players. And it means I don't think this is going to be bad for Virginia to watch. This is not going to be defense optional in Charlottesville, but it is going to be a faster pace, and you've got to have your pieces in place. And in this day and age, there was going to be roster turnover anyway. I applaud Ryan Odom for just flat out embracing it, TJ.
Yeah, I agree. Ryan Odom's going to bring a lot of great changes to UVA, bring in a faster pace game. A lot of people were getting bored with the slow pace-esque type scheme that UVA was running. So it's going to be interesting to see how the fan base takes it. I think you'll see a more lively fan base.
I think you will. And I think you'll see people that buy into it. And that's such a key element when you're looking at Virginia and their long-term outlook. Speaking of our long-term outlook, we'll get to that with more thoughts on Virginia, more thoughts on the landscape of college athletics with Brett Friedlander in about 5 minutes from SaturdayRoad.com. But speaking of 5, it's time for...
It's time for Fast 5 at 5-ish. 5-ish minutes on 5 relevant topics done around 5 p.m.-ish. Ish, because our counting skills are kind of ish. Let's start with number 5.
I will throw this out there to Virginia Tech fans. Which loss would be more challenging to swallow? 8-1 in baseball against Radford yesterday, or if they lose to Liberty softball today? And I don't think there's any doubt that while they'll probably beat Liberty softball, pop the music down. When I'm making this type of signal, TJ, it means bring the music down a little bit so I don't have to scream over it.
Yes, sir.
Liberty softball is a top 25 caliber program, and they're undefeated in Conference USA, and they've beaten good teams. Radford split the series, but that was an 8-1 shellacking in Blacksburg. It just felt like, and again, getting my usher on here in the fast lane, I was listening to the Evan Hughes radio broadcast on the VTR and Sports app yesterday as opposed to watching the game. But it almost felt like it was kind of stale for Virginia Tech baseball. And they're coming off the sweep against Wake Forest this past weekend. I get why that would be a big feather in the cap for the Hokies to not just beat the Demon Deacons and win a series, but to sweep them. That's a top 25 caliber program. So that's really good for Virginia Tech baseball. But they have these head-scratching losses where you don't want to accrue a ton of these because it leaves you less margin for error over the course of the season. Virginia Tech softball right now, they're a top 15 program. They should beat Liberty. They threw a no-hitter, Emily did, in Lynchburg a couple of weeks ago. But there's more margin for error for Virginia Tech softball, which is why I would be less concerned about that. Speaking of concerns, NASCAR, they have their concerns. And they announced penalties, including a 50-point deduction for Sammy Smith in the Xfinity Series for intentionally wrecking Taylor Gray in the latter stages of the NASCAR race at Martinsville. Here's my other thought on this. I've got 2 of them. Keep the points penalties. But if you really want to stick it to drivers, don't just make it a points penalty. When the next race starts, they're automatically a lap down or 2 laps down. And they start the race maybe knowing they've got a really strong car, but the margin for error gets thinner. Penalties on pit road probably is going to derail your day. Speeding penalties, lug nut penalties, whatever they are. I like the idea of a carryover penalty, not just the 50-point deduction, but bring them in and black flag them during a race and start them a lap or 2 down the following race. That will send the message. You don't deprive the fans of seeing their driver, but you make it infinitely more challenging to be able to not only win the race where you intentionally wreck somebody like Sammy Smith did, but you also punish them in the points sphere. So whatever you earned is going to get negated. And oh, by the way, you start the next race at a disadvantage. There are ways you can start to do that for NASCAR. I'll be curious if the old school head himself, Mike Neff of FrontStretch.com, agrees tomorrow in the fast lane. We are down to 4. That's right. Alex Ovechkin's chase has reached the Final Four. He scored career goal 891 early in that 4-3 win against Boston last night. News update if you've been hiding under a blanket for hockey, as many of us have in the Fast Lane and the Virginia Talk Radio Network audience, because college basketball is wrapping up. But this is not the Boston Bruins of a couple of years ago where they've been good. This is the Boston Bruins who got rid of their coach earlier this year. He's gone to St. Louis, and they're actually a playoff caliber team, and Boston is not. They're a train wreck right now, to be diplomatic. But Alex Ovechkin is now 4 away from breaking, 3 away from tying Wayne Gretzky's NHL career record. He has 8 games remaining in the season, and there are some layup-type games in there. Plus, it's not just empty netters now that Ovechkin is accruing. This is a good run for Alex Ovechkin right now, and I think there's a very reasonable chance that he'll be able to break this record eventually, probably within the next couple of days. Meanwhile, we didn't get a chance to touch on this earlier, but we have history coming up this weekend in the NCAA Final Four. Because for the first time ever, we're going to have all 4 number 1 seeds. Yeah. Because according to the NCAA record books, in 2008, Memphis never played in the Final Four because it was vacated.
Yeah.
How dumb is that rule? It continues to just be the most ridiculous thing that's out there. So technically, while everyone's saying it's the second time ever and the second time in San Antonio, because that 2008 Final Four was in San Antonio, it's the second time ever, and the second time in San Antonio, we have 4 1 seeds in a Final Four. Not according to the record books, because we vacated Memphis's performance, and that would be great if I could vacate seeing Mario Chalmers tie the game and Memphis not miss those free throws, but it also would mean I wouldn't have gotten to see the CDR Chris Douglas Roberts dunk over Kevin Love in the Final Four. Meanwhile, Owen Aquino, the next Liberty men's basketball player to enter the transfer portal. This is an underrated departure for the Flames. Statistically, after playing and starting in all 35 games for the Flames, there wasn't a gaudy stat line for him. 8.5 points, 5.5 rebounds, 2.5 assists, and a block per game. But here's where it stings for Liberty. He was versatile, as we mentioned from those stats. He was a 58% shooter from the field. Now, not great free throw shooter, but if you're Liberty, you kind of wonder in the back of your mind, NIL may be playing a factor. This is a versatile piece. I don't know exactly what he'll be able to do to transfer up, because his last experience was at East Florida State College for 2 years in the JUCO ranks. I don't blame him for wanting a little bit of extra time, maybe seeing that playing time might diminish if Isaiah Ian and Josh Smith are progressing better than expected from injuries. But for Liberty, that is a loss for the Flames of Owen Aquino, one of the players that entered the transfer portal. I don't think there's any doubt, TJ, that this is the one where you go, ugh, it stings, even if you realize you may have a finite budget of resources, and obviously you're keeping Porter, Cleveland, and Matheny, and there's the hope that they can find a way to keep Taylor and Peter around, and if that's going to be the case, hey, you've got these other elements that are out there. You can't keep everyone in most cases, even in a place like Liberty.
Yeah. For sure, and the good thing about Liberty is being the richest mid-major out there, you can afford to go and get some players out there money-wise.
And the other thing people don't realize is, you talk about Owen Aquino, you talk about Taylor and Peter among the transfers, but they transferred up, and a lot of people didn't know what they or Javon Mothmer could bring to Liberty. Mothmer's out of eligibility, but it shows that Richie McKay and his staff know how to identify lower-level talent and bring them in, and they're willing to take flyers on the right kind of guys upper end. I mean, everybody in basketball is doing this, so I don't sound the alarm, and in particular, given the other defections going on in Conference USA, which we'll get to at another time. Meanwhile, when we return, speaking of college basketball, Brett Friedlander of Saturday Road will discuss the ACC's outlook, including Ryan Odom to UVA, Cooper Flagg in the era at Duke, and that and more. When we return, this is the Fast Lane on the VTRN Sports app, and ask that smart speaker, open VTRN Sports.
Mark Dalton here with Terry Volkswagen. Get ready to fall head over heels for the perfect VW SUV. One size doesn't fit all, though, and that's why Volkswagen has an SUV for everyone. From the compact and affordable Volkswagen Taos to the tech-packed Tiguan and the spacious Volkswagen Atlas. No matter which one fits your lifestyle, you'll love the comfort, performance, and safety. Stop by Terry Volkswagen on Forest Road in Lynchburg or check us out online at terrybw.com. Terry Volkswagen. You'll love our cars.
Do you have a sports card and memorabilia collection?
Wow.
Did you inherit one? Not sure what to do with it? BNC Sports has been your local hobby store for over 30 years, and they'll provide their professional assessment and can cash you out. No collection is too big or too small, so don't drop the ball. Stop by the mall or give us a call. BNC Sports, the game starts here.
Your home is more than just walls and windows. It's where life happens. And at Right Choice Construction, we get that. We're not just builders. We're fathers, mothers, neighbors, just like you. And every nail and every beam reflects our commitment to creating a place you're proud to live in. With Right Choice Construction, you're choosing a team that's been perfecting the art of building for years. So build with us, build with experience, build with quality, build with Right Choice.
Do you know what a cold climate heat pump is? They're a new generation of heat pumps from Tara Lee Mosley that provide substantially more heat than traditional heat pumps, even when it's 5 degrees outside. This means your electrical auxiliary heat runs less, saving you big time on your electric bill. And with the recent spikes in electric utility rates, that's crucial. Plus, these new heat pumps qualify you for a $2,000 federal tax credit. Contact Tara Lee Mosley for more info on the new cold climate heat pumps.
When shopping for auto insurance, it's worth paying a little bit more for strong coverage against uninsured drivers. That way, if you're on the wrong end of an accident, you and your family are protected from drivers with little to no insurance. Hi, I'm Randy Trost with Trost Law. Just a friendly reminder that saying yes to a strong policy with higher uninsured motorist coverage limits is a small investment that you can make to protect you and your family against a big headache. If you've been injured in a motor vehicle accident, call us at 777-HURT or visit trostlaw.com.
Welcome to the Villas at Oakwood, offered by Oakwood Villas Retirement Homes, LLC, the best kept secret in Bedford. Our stunning community offers spacious, one-level modern villas with top-of-the-line amenities. Enjoy a walk through our landscape community, connect with neighbors in our clubhouse, and take in the views of the peaks. Visit thevillas@oakwood.com or contact Robin Lee Sage at 434-238-4477, brokered by Legacy Realty and Development.
When you're voted one of the best plumbers according to Lynchburg Living magazine, you want to hire the best. Sullivan Plumbing wants the best plumbers to join our award-winning team. Do you have a clean driving record? Do you have at least 4 years plumbing experience? Then you're a 5-star recruit, and Sullivan Plumbing would love to meet with you. Take the first step. Call Sullivan Plumbing in downtown Lynchburg or email sullivanplumbing@gmail.com.
Step into the Fast Lane 24/7 at Trey Lyle VT and Fast Lane Ed Lane on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Now, back to the Fast Lane.
Are they less compelling? Our listenership would not indicate that. We had a great streaming for the month of March, even with Virginia and Virginia Tech not making the NCAA men's or women's basketball tournaments. JMU flaming out in the latter stages of their Sun Belt tournaments, and Liberty, they made the NCAA tournament in men's and women's basketball, but they did not do very well, neither one winning a game for the Flames, men's or women's Liberty basketball. So it kind of shapes things to a certain extent, maybe closer than expected because we primarily cover those teams. But the ACC, only one team was even there and did well, and that's the Duke Blue Devils, who were in the Final Four to the surprise of 0 people, being one of the 4 number 1 seeds that are in the Final Four. And I will see if our next guest was there in 2008. The last time we basically, I have to couch this, but basically had 4 number 1 seeds in the Final Four. I mean, technically, Brett, as Brett Friedlander of SaturdayRoad.com is with us in the Fast Lane, there were only 3 1 seeds in the Final Four because Memphis and John Calipari vacated that appearance. So I don't, as a guy who was in Memphis at the time, I'll be the first to admit, I conveniently remember Chris Douglas Roberts stuffing Kevin Love and doing a great little taunt afterwards, but I do not remember the 9 missed free throws and the 9-point lead that was blown, nor do I misremembered the Mario Chalmers shot that broke the hearts of Memphis, from which they've never recovered.
Yeah, I was not there, and it's a good thing Kansas won that too, because otherwise we would have had the first championship vacated, and obviously we've had one since with Louisville. But yeah, I was not there. I watched that one on TV, but I will be there this time, and I'm looking forward to it because I think there's going to be some really, really good basketball played.
You think it'll be good? Is Duke going to blow out Houston, as some people think they might, given how well they've played, or is Houston too tough too well coached for that to be a realistic scenario.
You know, you'd think that Alabama would have been and took care of them by 20. I think that there's a possibility that can happen, but I think that Houston plays such good defense that I think they're going to keep that game close. And it's one of those deals where this is why Duke is, I think, the best team, and why they're going to win is because they can win a different style of game every night. They're going to have to win a rock fight on Saturday against Houston. And I think that as we saw against Alabama, they can play good enough defense, and they've got just too many offensive weapons. I think they can outscore Houston. But when I say outscore, I don't mean scoring 80 points. I mean maybe winning 57-53. And so I just think that Duke can beat you in too many different ways. And Houston is not offensively dimensional enough to be able to win that game. We'll see. But I think that the real exciting game is going to be on Monday. Whoever wins that Auburn-Florida game, and I'm thinking Florida's going to win that game for a couple of reasons. First of all, Walter Clayton Jr. is really on a heater right now, and he's just something special. Florida is longer than Auburn, and I think they'll be able to take care of a healthy Janai Broome, and who knows if he's going to be healthy. So I still think Duke has just got too much versatility, and they've got too many weapons, and will win this thing. But that's why they play the games. But I think it's going to be an exciting brand of basketball.
Brett Friedlander of SaturdayRoad.com stopping by the Fast Lane, and it's always great to be chatting with him. It's been far too long, by the way. He's at Bree Freed ACC for those that have been smart enough to keep up with him in this long extended absence, Brett, for which we can make a gazillion excuses, but none of them are very viable. Duke basketball, though, you mentioned what would happen in beating Houston. Would they rather play Auburn just because of Janai Broome's injury, and Florida seems maybe a little bit longer, more athletic, and more versatile?
You know, I don't really think it really matters who they play, because I think it's up to Duke. If Duke is Duke, they win no matter who they play. So, but yes, I think that, and they've already beaten Auburn once. I think that Auburn would be the more optimal matchup. But if Duke plays Duke basketball, I think that they win regardless of who they play. They're just too good. I mean, look, in the region semifinals against, I can't even remember who they played on last Friday. Cooper Flagg goes off for 30 points and 8 rebounds and 7 assists and does his thing. But against Alabama on Saturday night, Flagg was 6 of 16 from the floor. He just really didn't have his typical day, although he still scored 16 points. But Knipple and Sion James and Tyrese Proctor, it choose your poison, and so I just think if Duke does what Duke does, they win.
Brett Friedlander with us here in the Fast Lane. Brett, you wrote the article that has kind of sparked thoughts for so many of us at SaturdayRoad.com. Duke actually being somewhat, dare I say it, but likable in this particular run. How much of that is due to the fact that they are lacking two things? They're lacking your Coach K pontificating, pious attitude as the head coach, and they're lacking the villain type player that Coach K would defend for his antics, like a Grayson Allen, or I'll get in trouble for saying this based in Virginia, but current Lakers coach and Roanoke native JJ Redick among the many on that list. Yes,
and I think it's a combination of both, because you don't have the snarling, cursing Coach K on the sideline. You've got John Shire, who does it with a smile. That's the thing. He basically was trained at the side of K, both as a player and an assistant, but he does it with a much softer kind of touch. And then you're right. I thought at the beginning of this season that Con Knipple was going to be the prototype Duke player that everybody loved to hate, because he's kind of a gym rat. Even though he's talented, he's kind of that effort kind of player. And I just saw him slapping the floor and doing, all the things that make people, hate Duke so much. But he hasn't been. And it's, you've got Cooper Flagg, who not only is the best player in the country, but I mean, he's doing commercials with his grandma, and who makes him shake hands with everybody after he wins at bingo. I mean, I don't think Duke is going to ever be likable, because I think the entity of Duke people are so conditioned to thinking that they're the bad guys. They're not going to like them, but I think this is a team that's hard to hate.
It's interesting you bring all that up and just the personality around Duke. How much of this also boils back to their head coach is John Shire, and people think, oh, another white guy who played for Duke. But he never was that type of guy, it seemed, as a player, certainly not to the level of others, where you really grew to detest the way the guy played, even though he seems to have a competitive spirit. And now he's led a program that's tough. They still have a level of swagger to them, but it's not the, again, snarly Coach K attitude of, maybe not practicing what we preach.
Yeah. And, the thing about it is when Shire was a player, the national championship team of 2010, it was such a together group. I mean, he was the leading scorer, but there was no real star player on that team. And if you remember right, the thing that Shire was best remembered for was the crazy faces that he would make, the contortion Shire face thing. And it was kind of almost like a joke kind of situation. It's like, oh, look. And so I think you're right. He was not one of those guys that kind of stood out like a Grayson Allen, like a Steve Wojciechowski. He wasn't the kind of guy who grated on people's nerves the way some of those other. And you're right, JJ, because boy, JJ and Maryland fans, that was a war that went on for 4 years.
Yes, it was. It went for quite a while, and there were a lot of iterations of that between JJ and Maryland, and even Tyler and JJ getting in on it, Tyler Hansborough to a certain extent, which leads us to the other part of Duke being in the Final Four. Is this the great masking and Band-Aid that Duke may win this thing, and they are the deserved favored coming out of the ACC, but this is a year where it was kind of like, and maybe this is an apt comparison, maybe not, but it feels like Duke in the ACC this year is like Florida State in ACC football back in the 90s.
It kind of is. And look, here's the thing. Jim Phillips, if Duke wins this thing at next year's media day, he's going to crow this like, oh, yeah, we get a national champion. But let's not sugarcoat it. The ACC was historically bad this year. And Louisville and Clemson flaming out in the first round did not help. So basically, Duke is not a product of the ACC. Duke is a one-off, a product of Duke. And I don't think that it matters what conference that they were in. This is the best team in the country right here. You put them in the SEC, they would have been just as good. Maybe they wouldn't have gone 19-1, but they would have been pretty close. And so I think that while the ACC will definitely latch onto this and try to take credit for it, I think this is more a Duke thing than an ACC thing. Now, having said that, I've got some real optimism for the ACC moving forward for a couple of reasons. First of all, I think the recent coaching hires, Pat Kelsey at Louisville, bringing in Kyle Smith with Stanford, and now these recent ones, Will Wade going to NC State, Ryan Odom going to Virginia, Jay Lucas down at Florida, and Luke Locke to Florida State. I think the quality of coaching has been raised significantly over the last couple of years. And I think that's something that really needs to happen, because with the retirements of Coach K and Roy Williams and Tony Bennett and Mike Bray and now Larinaga and Leonard Hamilton, you've seen a major drop off. And I think that has a big effect on why the ACC is struggling right now. So I think there's a chance that they can come back because the quality of coaching has been raised. And then the other thing too is the revenue sharing plan that has been put into effect that will now end the Clemson, Florida lawsuits. I think for the successful programs, that will give them a little bit more money to spend on NIL and bring in better players. Because if you watch the NCAA tournament the last couple of weeks, you will notice that with the exception of Duke, that none of the teams in the ACC this year played to the quality that we've seen the last couple of weeks. So those are the two things that have me optimistic that maybe things will get better. But you're right, this was not a great ACC year.
Brett, you mentioned all of that, and it gets to a bigger picture. Was there any kind of edict sent openly or behind the scenes to these schools in the ACC, like Miami and Florida State with Leonard Hamilton and Jim Larinaga, NC State, who, they had the great run with Lynchburg native Kevin Keats, but really it wasn't a successful tenure overall. Louisville was a disaster at Kenny Payne, and even Virginia after Tony Bennett. Was there any kind of edict from the ACC that we've got to get this correct because we've been embarrassed in a year where the SEC is kind of laughing in our face?
I would certainly hope so. I don't know that for fact, But I would say that, something has to be done because it is an embarrassment. And here's the thing. ACC was founded on basketball. That was the ACC's identity for the longest time. And to have it at the state that it is now is totally unacceptable. So whether it was done on a league-wide edict or if, some of these athletic directors and chancellors decided, hey, we can't let this happen. We got to do something. But I do have high hopes. We'll see. But the coaching is a very good first step. But in this landscape, under these new rules, you've got to put the resources in for NIL because you can't win without players, and you've got to be able to afford them.
Yes, you do. It's all about having as many
dollar bills, y'all.
As Kenny Powers would like to remind us, because without that, as Melissa McCarthy reminded us on Saturday Night Live, you have
lots of power
going other places, not for you.
Yep.
So we cannot resist the opportunity to bring out folk heroes like Kenny Powers and Melissa McCarthy, nor can we resist the insight of Brett Friedlander from SaturdayRoad.com. Brett, thank you for dousing us with a little optimism here after a dismal ACC basketball season. Hopefully we'll chat well before seeing you in Charlotte in a couple of months, a little over 3 months for ACC kickoff.
Sounds good, Eddie.
Brett Friedlander with us here in the Fast Lane. When we return from that type of basketball to spring sports, local spring sports with Ben Cates, newsadvance.com, here in the Fast Lane on the VTRN Sports app, and ask that smart speaker, open VTRN Sports.
Guests are great, except unwanted guests. At Specialty Exterminating, we know the difference. Hi, I'm Sabrina Kennan with Specialty Exterminating. We help you keep unwanted pests out of your home. Now we can keep those reptiles away. Our new reptile repellent is the perfect add-on for your pest prevention service. It's pet and people safe, so it's perfect for any homeowner, especially pool owners and homes in wooded and rural areas. Call us so we can repel the reptiles. Specialty Exterminating, your pest prevention partner since 1979.
When you're voted one of the best plumbers according to Lynchburg Living magazine, you want to hire the best. Sullivan Plumbing wants the best plumbers to join our award-winning team. Do you have a clean driving record? Do you have at least 4 years plumbing experience? Then you're a 5-star recruit, and Sullivan Plumbing would love to meet with you. Take the first step. Call Sullivan Plumbing in downtown Lynchburg or email sullivanplumbing@gmail.com.
Allstate agent Donovan Howell is now serving Lynchburg. He lives and works here just like you. And with all kinds of local insurance advice, Donovan is someone you can count on to help you protect all that's good in your life. Donovan makes it easy to save on the quality protection you need, and he'll even help you do the switching and the paperwork for you.
Call or come by the Donovan Howell Allstate office in Windhurst today.
When the thrill of playing ball turns into the agony of a broken windshield or car window, contact Apple Auto Glass. Your local auto glass repair shop on Allegheny Avenue in Lynchburg, Apple Auto Glass provide a professional assessment with the honesty from your neighbors, so you can get back to cheering the great moments this season. We're here with Colt from We Fix Stupid Computers. Colt, to go along with your residential or individual walk-in services that you offer, you also do a lot of business IT support. How about you discuss that, and what specifically do you do to help businesses in the area?
We see a lot of that. Small to medium-sized businesses, they still have their IT projects. They still need resources to help them within their office and for remote users. And so we'll step in and fill in the gap where we do a lot of projects for them, help them manage their resources, their budgets, and get their technology under control.
Colt, how can these people reach out to you to assess their IT needs?
Call us. Our number is 434-525-8590. Our website, wefixstupidcomputers.com. We're on Facebook. And our office is here locally, 14690 Forest Road, right next to Scott's Cabinet on 221.
Step into the Fast Lane 24/7 at Trey Lyle VT and Fast Lane Ed Lane on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Now, back to the fast lane.
Ben Cates of newsadvance.com is a very busy man year-round, but even more so today because he's been over at Lynchburg City Stadium with the Lynchburg Hillcats. And their media day, their season begins in another week. Shameless plug. You can get your tickets with that $10 food voucher good for a hot dog, chicken tenders, or hamburger at insaneradiodeals.com. But, Ben, it's fascinating to look at the Hillcats. And I'm not just saying this because we partnered with them the last handful of years here at the Virginia Talk Radio Network, but seeing the amount of coverage around the Lynchburg Hillcats, have you noticed the interest in people being more concerned about the Hillcats from both an entertainment product and even what they're doing on the field rise over the last couple of years?
Yeah, it's really interesting, Ed. Thank you for having me, by the way. Yeah, it's always a good time of year when you've got opening day coming up for minor league parks, and as had really nice weather recently for the most part, and that always plays a factor in getting people out to the park. And yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people really look forward to not only getting the family out to the park for a nice outing, but there's so many diehard baseball fans in Lynchburg. Lynchburg's always been a good little baseball town, and so it's always interesting to see who's next up, who's new in the lineup, what changes are being made with the organization, and so I think that continues this year. It's quality entertainment, and it's also you get to see a lot of really good athletes come to town.
Yes, you do. You get to see quite a bit of them as Ben Cates is with us here in the fast lane. Ben, you look back at this too, but the Hillcats, how much of the interest in baseball is tied to the fact that there's an interest in high school baseball. We see how strong the Seminole District is, and now they've really embraced it. This was the third, fourth year of the Ronnie Roberts Classic, which this past year it was the 28th of March, but inviting different high school programs to come and play at City Stadium and kind of creating I don't even call it a cultural event, but maybe it is, but an event-based feel to it that kind of links the minor league baseball team in town, the Lynchburg Hillcats, with so many of the high school programs in the area.
Yeah, I remember when I was in high school, I was not a very good baseball player, but I do remember getting to play at the ballpark once a year at Winston-Salem at their minor league park, and it was just always such a thrill. It was just overwhelming. And so for these kids in high school to be able to go out there and play on a minor league field, it's rewarding. You certainly look forward to it. And it's a lot of different dimensions. It's kind of hard to get used to for kids, but yeah, that's always a super fun thing. And, that event, the Ronnie Roberts Classic, has always really brought a lot of people out to the stadium. And, they started it in 2020 with COVID as a chance to give kids a chance to play when their high school season got taken away. And it's carried on, and it's been a really good tradition every year when you can get, 8 different teams over 2 days out to Bank at the James Stadium. I think it's good for high school baseball too. It promotes our local teams, and that's always a good thing as well.
Ben Cates 8 on Twitter and newsadvance.com as he's hanging out with us today in the fast lane. He covers local sports on a broader level, but high school sports as well is his biggest area of focus. And we'll get to high school spring sports momentarily, Ben, but the Lynchburg Hillcats themselves, you were there at Media Day. This is where I give you a blank canvas, whether it's the accessibility of the franchise and the players that have come through, even with a lot of them hoping to not be here very long because they want to move up the Cleveland Indians organization. What are takeaways that jumped out about the product you expect fans to be able to see from the Hillcats? I will pinpoint this through the first 6 weeks or so of the year before some of those guys may be called up.
Yeah, it's always interesting. I was talking to Jordan Smith, the manager of the Hillcats, who's back for his third year, and he's kind of taking a wait and see approach with a lot of these guys that are new, and just kind of like, where do they plug in? There's you got a lot of utility guys that can plug into different spots in the infield, and then you've got a really strong pitching, what is projected to be a really strong pitching staff with some new guys in the organization. And I think, the pitching is going to be a thing to watch. It's always interesting at the single A level because you've got so many different teams who have different strengths. And so sometimes there are some years when overall in the Carolina League, the hitting is kind of ahead of the pitching. And then sometimes, you have the pitching that's more developed than the hitting. So you're always kind of in a wait and see approach. But I would say, yeah, that staff, I think they're banking on that staff really, really providing a good amount of really strong innings out there. And then also with the bats, it's going to be interesting to see. I think this team is going to be more of a contact hitting team again, like it has been the past few years. Get on base, steal a lot of bases. Base stealing the past 2 years with this club has been a really strong thing. I think they set a record 2 years ago for the most steals in a single season in the minor league at that level, and so it's going to be very interesting to see what this team kind of molds into. But I think the Hillcats are always kind of up there and in the mix, never really at the bottom. And so I would expect that to continue this year.
Ben, let's not get it twisted that a lot of fans, myself and our family included, the primary appeal of going to the game is the festive atmosphere around the ballpark, but people do have an interest in wanting to see a team that's competitive and plays well, and the players are being developed, and that's a big indicator of that. How much is the biggest endorsement from the on-field product with the Lynchburg Hillcats? The fact that you brought back a manager for the third consecutive year, which would lead you to believe that the Cleveland Indians have faith in Jordan Smith, that he knows what he's doing, helping them achieve their ultimate goal, which is to develop, which in a lot of cases is bred off into what fans see, which is a good product of players while they're here in Lynchburg.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Jordan has done a really good job with the program. Just kind of a lot of times I am kind of looking at it from afar while another reporter kind of goes out and covers the Hillcats for us. But you notice these kinds of things, these trends. And Jordan, I think, has always been a guy who really likes being in Lynchburg and, makes baseball a family atmosphere really with his team, and takes his wife and 2 kids on the road with him to games. And for those long series that we have now in the Carolina League. And so I think it's the kind of thing where, he's invested in the organization, is very happy with the Cleveland Guardians, and also is really enjoys his time in Lynchburg.
Ben Cates 8, Twitter, and newsadvance.com with us in the Fast Lane. Ben, we will get to spring sports in greater depth in the coming weeks with you, but we wanted to, I wouldn't say put a bow on winter sports because there are stories that will continue to develop, but you have a great article at newsadvance.com about a week ago about DJ Trent in particular and how he won his state championship in the 175-pound division at Jefferson Forest, and the fact that the way in which he did it was rather interesting because he pinned his opponent, but it wasn't a pin for the win necessarily. It resulted in a shoulder injury that led him to that particular point. And if folks are familiar with DJ Trent, he was a name we called regularly on JF Cavalier Football, presented by TrostLaw.com, as he was a linebacker for them as well. But how unique is that in the sense that there's all this anticipation for athletes of all levels for a chance to win a state championship, and it happens, but maybe not in the way you would expect?
Yeah, it was an interesting story. I kind of wanted to, or felt like I needed to frame that column around this idea of what it is like to win and achieve your goal, and for it to be, kind of melodramatic, I guess, in a way, just really interesting that you can, especially in wrestling, like you can prepare all year long, and you can really, and those guys that I talked to had a lot of injuries they had to overcome too, but you can really go through this whole process of always wanting to be a state champion. And then when you get to the state tournament, you are pinning your way through the entire time. So you're really focused and looking forward to that final match. And then for it to end on an injury when, that you were deemed really not responsible for. And so you win in that way. is kind of it's kind of interesting. So I wanted to know, like, how have times been for you since? You know, like, what have you gone through since when you stopped to think that wrestling's over and you achieved your goal, but it didn't really go the way you wanted to? And so I think that's part of sports and that's part of life. And if you can find that connection with that kid and tell that story properly, then you're getting really closer to not only telling a sports story, but telling a life story as well.
Ben, you've told many stories greatly. We appreciate your sharing that with us today here in the Fast Lane. We'll chat again soon.
Thank you, Ed.
Ben Cates, newsadvance.com. That's how we wrap up the Fast Lane today. We're back tomorrow. Prayerfully, Clark Kellogg of CBS Sports. Thanks for listening to the Fast Lane on VTR and Sports, 93.3 FM, W227 BG Timberlake, and 1320 AM, WVGM Lynchburg.